Right. So now we're going to finish up Chapter 7 with Section 7.5, and we're going to be talking about comparing two different population proportions with confidence. So in Section 7.1, we defined a statistic as a number that is based on data from a sample and used to estimate a population parameter. In the last section, we used sample proportions, so we used statistics to estimate population parameters, to estimate things about a proportion. In this section, we're going to use the difference of two sample proportions to estimate the difference between the two population proportions. So the big thing to kind of point out here is this first word that we're looking for, and we see repeated a couple of times, the difference. So what does the difference mean? Even if the population proportions are equal for two populations, the sample proportions drawn from these populations are different. Confidence intervals are one method for determining whether different sample proportions indicate there are real differences in the population proportions. Our comparison of two population proportions will be based on the statistic P1 hat minus P2 hat, which is going to be used to estimate the difference between the two population proportions, P1 minus P2. So again, we're thinking differences, whether we're looking at a sample or whether we're looking at a population. When we're finding a confidence interval for the difference in our proportions, P1 minus P2, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be checking to see if 0 is included in the interval. If 0 is in the interval, this suggests that the two population proportions might be the same. If 0 is not in the interval, the confidence interval is going to tell us how much greater one of the proportions might be than the other, and we're going to see this information kind of summarized on the next page. So, questions that we want to ask as we're looking at these confidence intervals for our differences. Is 0 included in the interval? Right? If 0 is included in the interval, then we cannot rule out the possibility that the population proportions are equal, or they are the same. What does it mean if we have positive values or negative values? We get a positive value if P1 is greater than P2. So population 1 is greater than the proportion in population 2. If we get a negative value, P1 is less than P2. So the proportion in population 1 is less than the proportion in population 2. So we want to see if 0 is included in the interval, and we also want to pay attention to signs. The greatest possible difference is the upper limit of our confidence interval. The smallest possible difference is the lower limit of our confidence interval. And what these are going to tell us, when both are positive and both are negative, then we're going to kind of get some information which we can further use in our interpretations. So, when we're interpreting our confidence intervals for our two proportions, basically what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to come back and look at this table. If our interval contains 0, the population proportions might be equal. If both values are positive, P1 is greater than P2. If both values are negative, then P1 is less than P2. Right? There's a little note down at the bottom here. It doesn't matter what we choose as population 1 or population 2. We just want to make sure that we stay consistent with that when we are going through our process. So we're going to go through a couple of examples where we're just talking about interpretations, and then we're going to go through a couple of examples using StatCrunch to walk us through this process kind of from beginning to end.